Two cities, two cultures, two very different examples of Canada. Toronto and Montreal have been rivals for generations. But which city actually offers the better experience?
Across Canada, cities compete for attention, reputation, and bragging rights. Some are polished and powerful. Others are historic and full of personality. And depending on who you ask, one city or another always claims the crown as the country's most exciting destination.
Which is why we decided to settle the argument the only way we know how. One debate at a time. Two cities enter the ring, and by the end, we leave it up to you to decide which destination truly delivers the better experience.
And today's matchup might be one of the biggest rivalries in the country.
Toronto.
Montreal.
One city is polished.
One city is passionate.
One city is efficient.
One city is electric.
And somewhere in this debate, Bo is actually going to agree with one of my points.
Which may shock absolutely everyone listening.
So today,
we're putting them head to head. Welcome to Battle of the Cities.
Welcome to Discover Canada in Style, where we explore Canada's great cities, remarkable destinations, and the lifestyle that makes this country so fascinating.
Welcome to Discover Canada in Style. I'm Bo Kaufman, and sitting across from me is Abby. Today we're stepping into the ring for the ultimate Canadian heavyweight debate, Toronto versus Montreal. And if you know me, you already understand that my travel philosophy is very simple. I've worked too hard in life to be uncomfortable. When I travel, I want quiet. I want immaculate service. And ideally, I want a good drink that I can enjoy without shouting across the table over a nightclub DJ. That is exactly why I'm backing Toronto today. Montreal certainly has charm, and I'll admit that right away. But charm sometimes comes with complications that I personally have no interest in dealing with on a relaxing weekend trip.
Oh, here we go.
Montreal can feel like a logistical maze of construction zones and cobblestone streets that were clearly designed centuries before anyone thought about comfortable walking shoes. Toronto, on the other hand, is Canada's financial engine, and a city where luxury experiences tend to operate exactly as advertised. You have the Ritz-Carlton, the St. Regis, polished, predictable, world-class service, where the staff understands hospitality down to the smallest detail. And if I'm paying $800 a night for a room, quirky character is not the priority. What I want is perfection.
You are so incredibly predictable, Bo. Hi everyone, I'm Abby, and here's the reality. If a place isn't memorable, then why are we traveling there at all? Travel should never feel like hiding inside a quiet corporate hotel lobby. Travel is about energy. It's about atmosphere. It's about the stories you bring home afterward. Toronto might be wealthy and impressive, but a lot of it feels like one giant glass boardroom.
A very comfortable boardroom.
Exactly my point. Montreal is the opposite experience entirely. It's romantic, creative, and slightly chaotic in the best possible way. The city feels alive the moment you arrive, from hidden cocktail bars, to art galleries, to cafes that somehow stay busy late into the night. You wander through neighborhoods like Le Plateau or Old Montreal, and every street seems to have its own personality. It feels cinematic, historic, and unmistakably unique. You want predictable luxury and quiet efficiency. I want the heartbeat of a city. Montreal gives you a story. Toronto gives you a perfectly organized receipt. So today, we're going to break down which city actually wins this debate in 2026.
All right, let's start with round one, the luxury stay. When I go to Toronto, I know exactly what I'm getting. Flawless service and quiet comfort. I check into places like the St. Regis or the Ritz-Carlton, and everything works exactly the way luxury hospitality is supposed to. The walls are thick, the rooms are immaculate, and the service is almost invisible, but absolutely perfect. If I suddenly need a pressed shirt at 2 in the morning, it simply happens. Nobody panics, nobody improvises, and nobody tells you the system is down. Because when you're paying $800 a night, surprises are not charming. Surprises are a problem. Abby calls that boring. I call it getting exactly what you paid for, which is the entire point of luxury travel in the first place.
Oh my goodness, you just described a corporate boardroom with a bed in it.
Now let's compare that with Montreal. You book a boutique hotel in Old Montreal, because it looks incredible in the photos online. The stone walls, the exposed brick, the romantic lighting, it all looks fantastic, until you actually spend a night there. Suddenly, those charming details start revealing themselves in other ways. The floorboards creak, like they're telling stories from the 1800s. Dust falls from exposed brick onto your luggage, and the bathroom feels like it was designed for someone traveling with a toothbrush and nothing else. I've worked far too hard in my life to pretend that sleeping in a drafty museum is somehow a premium travel experience. If comfort is the goal, Toronto wins this round without breaking a sweat.
Bo, you just made my entire argument for me. Toronto hotels are exactly what you described, polished glass boxes with absolutely zero soul. Sure, everything works perfectly, but you could wake up in Chicago or Frankfurt and never know the difference. Round 1 goes to Montreal, because Montreal actually has personality. When you stay somewhere like Hotel William Gray or Placed Arms, you're stepping into real history. The buildings have character because they've been standing for centuries, not because someone hired a designer last year.
And the plumbing probably dates back to those centuries too.
Very funny, but that character is exactly why people travel there in the first place. You get rooftop terraces overlooking the river, courtyards covered in climbing vines, and rooms that actually feel unique instead of copied from a corporate template. It's romantic, it's atmospheric, and it's unforgettable. If you want a quiet room that feels like a hospital suite, go to Toronto. But if you want a hotel that's actually part of the travel experience, Montreal wins this round every single time.
Let's move to round 2, the culinary scene. And before we even begin, let me clarify my personal standards for dining. I don't care how spectacular the food is. If I have to shout across the table just to hear my guest, the restaurant has already failed. Toronto understands high-end dining. The city now has more than 70 Michelin-recommended restaurants. Places like Albert and Jacobs and Company Steakhouse deliver an experience where everything is coordinated, from plating to pacing to service.
Oh yes, the sacred quiet temple of steak and spreadsheets.
Laugh all you want, but that precision matters. In those restaurants, the service feels like a symphony. The sommelier actually understands the difference between an Islay and a Speyside Scotch. And the room itself is designed for adults to have real conversations. Now, I'll happily admit that Montreal has fantastic food. Some of the best in the country, no question. But the experience around it often feels like a survival exercise rather than a dinner reservation. You're crammed ass to elbow in a tiny bistro in Le Plateau. The room is packed, the noise level is somewhere between party and riot, and half the evening is spent waiting outside in the cold, just hoping your table appears. For some people, that chaos is charming. Personally, I prefer enjoying my dinner without frostbite and a headache. For food plus comfort, Toronto takes round 2.
Bo, that is not suffering. That is called atmosphere. That is what happens when people are actually enjoying their lives instead of whispering politely over an expense account steak dinner. Toronto dining often feels like a room full of business meetings that accidentally ordered dessert. Everything is quiet, controlled, and incredibly predictable. Montreal restaurants feel alive the moment you walk through the door.
Alive is certainly one way to describe the noise level.
Exactly, because people are laughing, celebrating, and enjoying themselves. Montreal is widely considered the culinary capital of this country for a reason. Restaurants like Joe Beef or Liverpool House are legendary, not just for the food but for their character. The meals are bold, the wine flows freely, and the whole experience feels spontaneous and unforgettable. And after dinner, the city doesn't just send you back to the hotel. It opens up an entirely new adventure. You can slip into hidden cocktail bars like the Cold Room, tucked behind an unmarked door in Old Montreal. It feels like discovering a secret. In Montreal, dinner is never just dinner. It's the beginning of a night you'll talk about for years. For energy, personality, and unforgettable food experiences, Montreal wins round 2.
All right, let's move to round 3. The daily vibe and getting around. When I travel, I like a city that actually functions. Toronto is very good at that. You step out of your hotel, your Uber shows up exactly when the app says it will, and the streets mostly behave the way streets are supposed to behave. You get where you're going without needing a map, a translator, and a mild sense of adventure. The entire city runs with the efficiency of a well-managed system, which makes a weekend trip feel smooth instead of stressful.
You're describing transportation like it's a spa treatment.
Because it should be relaxing. Travel already involves airports, security lines, and questionable airplane coffee. Once I reach my destination, I prefer a city that lets me move around comfortably instead of turning every outing into an urban obstacle course. Montreal, on the other hand, seems to operate under a completely different philosophy. The entire city appears to exist in a permanent state of construction. Orange traffic cones are so common, they might as well be part of the official city branding. I'm not against exploring. I'm simply suggesting that exploration shouldn't involve a twisted ankle. The cobblestone streets in Old Montreal are beautiful, but they also feel like they were designed by someone who secretly dislikes comfortable footwear.
Montreal isn't meant to be navigated like a spreadsheet, Bo. It's meant to be explored. You wander through neighborhoods like Le Plateau or Mile End, and every block feels different. Street art appears around corners, cafes spill onto sidewalks, and the city encourages you to slow down. You don't rush through Montreal trying to maximize efficiency. You wander through it, discovering things you didn't expect to find. That spontaneity is exactly what makes the experience memorable.
Walking through that neighborhood can feel like a historical reenactment of 19th century transportation.
Those cobblestones are part of the charm. They remind you that the city actually has history, something you can see and feel under your feet. Toronto might move faster and more smoothly, but Montreal invites you to slow down and enjoy where you are. Sometimes the best parts of travel happen when you stop trying to optimize the experience.
All right, let's move into round 4, the money, or as I prefer to call it, the in-style tax. People love pointing out that Toronto is expensive. And yes, it absolutely is. But in the world of travel, price often reflects something very simple: reliability. When you pay more, systems tend to work better. Hotels run smoothly, restaurants keep their reservations, and transportation behaves the way it's supposed to behave. The entire weekend unfolds without friction, which is exactly what many travelers hope for when planning a city escape.
You're basically arguing that overpaying is a feature.
Not overpaying. Investing in peace of mind. Vacations are short, and time matters. If I'm visiting a city for a weekend, I'd rather spend my energy enjoying it than troubleshooting reservations or standing outside a restaurant wondering if my table still exists. Toronto may cost more, but the experience tends to run smoothly.
Or you could visit a city where your money simply goes further. Montreal offers incredible restaurants, distinctive boutique hotels, and an entire nightlife culture that doesn't require a second mortgage. Instead of carefully calculating every reservation, you can explore the city more freely. Your travel budget stretches further, which changes the entire experience.
Meaning you can afford 2 desserts instead of 1.
Exactly. Or a second bottle of wine, or one more late-night stop somewhere interesting. Montreal gives travelers the freedom to explore without constantly checking their credit card balance. That freedom encourages spontaneity, and spontaneity often turns into the best memories of the entire trip. Toronto may run like a luxury machine, but Montreal lets you enjoy the ride without worrying about the meter running the entire time.
All right, we've reached round 5, the final verdict. At this point, the case for Toronto is fairly clear. If you value comfort, polished service, and a city that runs like a well-managed operation, Toronto delivers a remarkably smooth experience from the moment you arrive. You check into a 5-star hotel, dinner reservations happen on schedule, transportation appears when you need it, and the entire weekend unfolds with quiet efficiency. For travelers who appreciate that kind of reliability, Toronto offers a city experience that feels refined and effortless. When every detail works the way it should, you spend less time managing the trip and more time enjoying it. Toronto may not surprise you every hour, but it consistently delivers exactly what it promises. For many travelers, that kind of reliability is part of the luxury.
And for travelers who want their trip to feel memorable, Montreal offers a completely different experience. This is a city where the evening rarely ends where it started. Dinner becomes a long conversation, which becomes another bar, which becomes a late walk through glowing streets full of music, laughter, and people enjoying the night. Montreal isn't trying to be perfectly organized. It's trying to be unforgettable.
Occasionally unforgettable for the wrong reasons.
Maybe once in a while, but that unpredictability is exactly what gives the city its personality. Montreal feels creative, expressive, and constantly alive. Every neighborhood has its own rhythm, and every evening has the potential to turn into a story. Some travelers want precision, others want adventure.
And that's where this debate finally moves from the studio to you.
So tell us what you think.
Toronto with its polished luxury and quiet efficiency?
Or Montreal with its culture, romance, and beautiful chaos? Tell us in the comments, and if you enjoy these debates, make sure you hit subscribe.
Because the next Battle of the Cities is already in production.
And this time we're heading coast to coast. Victoria, British Columbia.
Versus Halifax, Nova Scotia. Pacific elegance meets Atlantic charm.
2 historic harbor cities, 2 completely different coastal lifestyles. And I already know which one you'll prefer, Beau. I can read you like a book.
We'll see about that. That debate is coming soon.
We'll see you in the next Battle of the Cities.
Thanks for listening to Discover Canada in Style. If you enjoyed the episode, subscribe wherever you're watching or listening, and share the show with someone who loves exploring Canada.